Hi everyone, welcome to the first video in this series. So in this video, we're going to get started with setting up our own database. And this is mainly so that when we're doing live coding and we're teaching SQL, you can code alongside, side by side, and that'll help you learn. And you can also experiment with your own code after the video is over. So that's the main reason for doing this, so that you can code alongside and get an idea of how everything works. And you'll also get familiar with using a database on your own. So let's get started. The database that we're going to be using is MySQL. So MySQL is what is called an open source relational database management system. But don't worry if those phrases don't mean much to you right now. So open source, relational database management system. These are all concepts that we will cover in the upcoming videos. So right now, all you need to know is that MySQL is a computer program that allows you to create your own database and write SQL queries. Okay, so let's set it up. So I will close the PPT. And okay, so best to work alongside me as I go through the installation. So just open the web browser, whichever web browser you use. I use Google Chrome. And then Google MySQL. So click on you have to click on the first link that you see. That should be mysql.com. And this is the official website for MySQL. So go to the Downloads tab and then scroll to the bottom and then click on this link, MySQL Community GPL Downloads. So a whole bunch of other links pop up, but the one that you are interested in is MySQL Installer for Windows. So click on that. Okay, so depending on which OS you have, you will have to install a different file. So just make sure, so in this drop-down menu, you can select which OS you have. So I have Microsoft Windows, so that's one I've selected. So just make sure that you have the correct OS, that's pretty important. And then click download on the first link that you see. So the Windows x86 32-bit MSI installer. So just click on that one, download. And then it will ask you if you want to log in with your Oracle account, but we don't want to do that. So you can just say no thanks, just start my download. So just click on this right here and it will download the installer. Okay, so the installer has been downloaded. So I'll just close the web browser because we don't need it anymore. So the installer is here in my downloads file. So I'll double click on that. And it can take a minute or two to get started properly. Okay, so now the installation process is going to start. So if it asks you if you want to allow this app to make changes to your device, click yes. Okay, and the installation process has started. So the first thing that it's going to ask you to do is to choose a setup type. There's 5 different setup types depending on what you will use MySQL for. If you're a developer or if you are client facing or if you just want the server, the option that you need to choose is full because that just installs all the included MySQL products and features. So it has everything you need and more. It's the best option to choose. So just click on full and then click on next. So you might get a tab that shows you path conflicts. But don't worry about that. You can just click on next, and if there's a warning that comes up, just click yes. There's no problem. Okay, now there are some requirements that MySQL needs to run. So it's showing us that for MySQL we need to have Visual Studio version 2015. But don't worry about that. Again, all you have to do is just click next, and if there's a warning that pops up, click yes. We're not going to install Visual Studio and we're going to run MySQL without Visual Studio. So just click yes on the warning. Okay, so this tab is showing you all the products that will be downloaded, and the status for all of them should be ready to download. So this is good. It means that everything is running smoothly. So just click on execute and it will download all of these. So execute, and it can take a few minutes. So don't worry about that. Okay, so everything has been downloaded. And the next step is to install all of these products. So just click on next. And then, okay, so it's showing us all of these products are now ready to install, which is good. Everything seems to have been downloaded properly. So then just click execute and everything will get installed. So this is again a pretty slow process. It can take 15 to 20 minutes. So I'll just pause the recording and we'll resume when everything has been installed. So all of these programs have now been installed. So you can click on next. So in this step, what we need to do is we need to configure each of the products that we have. So you can see that we need to configure the server, the router, and the samples and examples. So we'll go through each product one by one and configure them. So just click on next for now. Okay, so for the server, what you can just leave all of the default settings as they are. Just make sure that the config type that you have is development computer, but otherwise everything else, just leave it as the default. These numbers might be different for you. Don't worry about that. Just leave everything as it is. Okay, then click on next. Okay, authentication method. Again, the default setting is strong password encryption for authentication. So you can just click on next. Okay, so here is where things might be a little different for you than they are for me. If you are installing MySQL for the first time, it will ask you to set a password, and then it will ask you to add a user to the server. So you add a user to the server and set up a name and a password for that user. So just to go over everything again, there will be two separate things that you need to do in this tab, accounts and roles. So first you will need to set up a sort of master password, and then you can add a user and give a name and a specific password for that user. So you don't have to you don't have to add a user, but I do recommend doing that. But yeah, you will have to give the master password. So I have already set all of that up, and that is why it doesn't show me that option. It just shows me the current root password. So I have to enter that, and then I can access the server. So if I click on check, okay. Yep, I had some trouble remembering the password. Okay, so now I've been able to access the server properly. So once you're done setting up your password and your user, you can just click on next. Okay, so here you're configuring MySQL Server as a Windows service. You can just leave all of the settings as they are. You don't need to change anything. So just click on next. Okay, now we are going to complete the configuration process. So these are all the steps that it will go through, but all you have to do is just click execute and it will do it by itself. So just click execute. Okay, so we've successfully configured the server. So just click on finish. Okay, so you can see that the server has been configured. Now we need to configure the router. So just click on next. And again, all of these are default settings, so don't worry about changing them. You shouldn't actually be able to change them if you if you went through the same steps I did in the server configuration step. So in the router configuration step, you don't have to change anything. So just click on finish. And yeah, actually in the router you don't need to configure anything. So that's fine. We've done that. Now we need to configure the samples and examples. So just click next. And here just enter the password that you set up in the previous step. So in the accounts and roles tab, it asks you to set up a master password. So that's the one that you need to enter here. Oops. And click on check. And if you've entered the password correctly, it should be able to connect to the server properly. Okay, so then click next and just click on execute. So we finished configuring everything, all of the products. Okay, so configuration successful. Click finish and then click on next. So yeah, you can see that all three of these two have been configured. This one did not need to be configured. So we've completed that step. So click on next. And that's it. That's the end of the installation process. So you can click on finish. Okay, so when you click on finish, the SQL Workbench should automatically open up. And what you do is click on database and say connect to database. And then just click. So these are all the default settings. You can leave that. Just click OK and it will connect to your database. Before you can access it, you need to enter the password that you set up. So just set up the password. Sorry, just type in the password and click OK. Okay, so this is the MySQL Workbench interface. We'll go through it and I'll give you the basic layout so that you can get started easily when we're teaching the actual SQL concepts. So let's look at what happens when I write a basic SQL query. So I'm going to write just one line of SQL code. You don't have to worry about what it means, but yeah, this is just some SQL code. So I can run it by clicking on the little lighting button here. So just click on this button. Okay, and there's a new pane that opens up. So this pane is your results pane. It's the output tab. It just shows you the output that comes from whatever SQL code you've written here. So you can see that there's some output here. And if you look here, you can see that there's the action output tab. So this is basically telling you, giving you the details of your query. So this shows the action that was performed. This shows when it was performed. So right now I did it at around 11 in the morning. So that's why the time is 11. This is the first query that was run. And you can see that the message column shows how many rows were returned. So our output had just one row. So that's why it just says one row returned. And then it tells you how long it took to execute the query. So the query that we wrote took hardly any time at all. So that's 0.000 seconds. Okay. The last thing that I want to show you is the schemas. So these are basically just some preloaded tables, preloaded databases that you have, and we can use these. So this is what we'll be using in our future videos as examples. And this is where you can access all of the databases that you have. So there's the Sakila database, and if you click on it, you can see all the tables in there, right? And similarly, the sys database, you can see there's just one table here with just one column. The world database has the city, country, and country language tables, and yeah. So this is just to give you an idea of how the workbench works. So this might look quite complicated, this whole getup here, the schemas, the databases and everything. But again, don't worry about that. We will cover those concepts thoroughly in the upcoming video. And when we come back to SQL, you will be able to understand exactly what all of this means. So this is just a basic run through of the MySQL Workbench. Before we end the video, there's one last thing I want to show you. It's how to save your queries and open them up again in Workbench. So this query, I'm going to save this query. So I can go to File and say Save Script As. And then I'll just save it on my desktop just to make things easy. And I can say and call it My First SQL. And it's saved as a .sql file. So that basically is marking the file as an SQL script. It contains SQL code. So that's essentially what the .sql extension is for. So I'll just say save, and I'll minimize that. And you can see here that my first SQL is stored on the desktop. So if I double click it, it'll just open it up in Notepad. So if you want to open it up in Notepad, you can do that. If you want to open it up in MySQL Workbench, just click on File and open SQL Script. And in desktop, I can just double click on My First SQL, and it opens it up in the Workbench. So if you want to exit the Workbench, just click on the X here. That's all you have to do. But if you open up the Workbench again, so if I'm opening up the Workbench again, then you need to connect to the database again. So you have to say database, connect to database, click on OK. And then again, you will have to enter the password. So each time you disconnect, each time you close the Workbench and open it up again, you have to connect to the database and enter your password. If you don't connect to the database, you won't be able to run your SQL code. So just remember that. But yeah, that is the end of the video. This just covers the basic the basic layout of Workbench and the installation process of MySQL. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.